You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we preview the ODI series and the one-off T20 International between Pakistan and Australia. It's the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast, and let's get started. Let's have a look at the fixtures for the ODI series and the one-off T20 International between Pakistan and Australia. All three ODIs and the one-off T20 will be played at the Gaddafi Stadium at Lahore. The first ODI will be on the 29th of March, the second ODI on the 31st of March, the third ODI on the 2nd of April, and the only T20 International on the 5th of April. Those are the fixtures for the ODI series and the one-off T20 between Pakistan and Australia. Let's have a look at the ODI and T20 international stats between Pakistan and Australia. We'll start with the ODI stats between the two countries. Head-to-head in ODIs overall, Pakistan have won 32, Australia have won 68. Both teams' records in Pakistan and ODIs, Pakistan have won 4, Australia have won 6. Leading run scorer, Ricky Ponting with 1,107 runs. Leading wicket taker, Wasim Akram with 67. Most dismissals, Adam Gilchrist with 44. Most catches, Steve Waugh with 19. Most matches, Wasim Akram with 49. And the first ODI match played between Pakistan and Australia was back in 1975. Let's have a look at the T20 international stats between Pakistan and Australia. Head-to-head in T20 internationals overall, Pakistan have won 12 to Australia's 10. Both teams' records in Pakistan and T20 internationals, both teams haven't played a T20 international in Pakistan before. The one-off T20 international in this tour for Australia will be their first T20 international played in Pakistan. Leading run scorer, David Warner with 397 runs. Leading wicket taker, Saeed Amjad with 19. Most dismissals, Karman Akmal with 12. Most catches, David Warner with 12. Most matches, Shoaib Malik with 17. And the first T20 international match played between Pakistan and Australia was back in 2007. Let's have a look at both Pakistan's and Australia's ODI and T20 international squads. Let's have a look at Pakistan's ODI and T20 international squad and talk about some of the challenges facing Pakistan in this ODI series and one-off T20 international. Their squad is Azam, Shadab Khan, Shafiq, Asif Afridi, Asif Ali, Zaman, Haider Ali, Rauf, Hassan Ali, Ahmed, Al-Haq, Shah, Haris, Mahmood, Rizwan, Wasim, Shakil, Shaheen Afridi, Dallin Hyde, and Qadir. That's Pakistan's ODI and T20 squad that they've selected. And for Pakistan, they'll be looking to bounce back after the Test series defeat to Australia just recently and hoping to do well in the ODI series and in the one-off T20 international. I've noticed with this Pakistan squad is that they've introduced some inexperienced players to their squad, mixed in with experienced players as well. Obviously, some of them have played no games at international level at all, and that is Asif Afridi. He hasn't played any international matches at all for Pakistan. Haris, the same. He hasn't played any international matches for Pakistan at all. So those are the two that haven't really played any international cricket at all for Pakistan in this squad for Pakistan. The others who haven't played a ODI match in this squad are obviously Abdullah Shafiq. Obviously, he hasn't played any ODIs yet for Pakistan. We know what he did in the Test series against Australia, and he did very well. So he's an uncapped player. The other uncapped players as well, I mentioned Asif Afridi and Haris before. Wasim, he hasn't played any ODIs before for Pakistan, but he has played 10 matches of T20 internationals for Pakistan, so he's got a bit of experience in the international format, but he hasn't played a single ODI yet for Pakistan, but he's played some international cricket for Pakistan. Dallin Hyde, he hasn't played any ODIs for Pakistan, but he's played 2 international matches for Pakistan, and that's in the T20 format. So he's got a bit of experience in international cricket, but he's just played the 2 games. So Pakistan definitely going in with different players, inexperienced players mixed in with experienced players in this ODI and T20 squad. Obviously, Pakistan looking to try and experiment with their ODI and T20 team, obviously, in this series. Australia doing the same thing as well. It's a good thing to try different players. Obviously, for Pakistan, looking forward ahead to the 50th World Cup next year in India, and also later on this year, the T20 World Cup in Australia. So definitely Pakistan trying different players, experimenting, seeing what they can do at the international level, especially those players who are uncapped and they haven't played a single ODI or a single T20 international. They'll be looking to experiment with them and see what they can do. Also for Pakistan, it's very important for them to try and win games in this ODI series, especially for the ICC Cricket World Cup Super League qualification for the World Cup next year in India. Every game counts. So they'll be making sure that, as well as experimenting and trying different players, but we've got to win some games and earn points because we've got to try and qualify for the 50th World Cup next year. So that's very important for both Pakistan and Australia in this series. So obviously, Babar Azam's the most experienced player in this ODI and T20 squad. He's played 83 ODIs. And then you have Hassan Ali, who's played 57, and then 53 to Saman, and then 48 to Shadab Khan, and then 46 to Iman al-Haq, and then 28 to Afridi. Asif Ali's only played 20. So there's some experience in there and some players who have played less than double digits games in terms of their experience. So Pakistan definitely going for the experimental, trying different players route, which is what they want to do, and that's very important to do that, to give players an opportunity and try them and see what the depth is like in Pakistan, which is very important for Pakistan going forward. Now, what are some of the challenges that they're going to face with the batting and the bowling up against this Australian team, which is a different look Australia ODI and T20 team compared to other teams they've had in the past? Obviously, there's no Stark, there's no Cummins, there's no Hazelwood, there's no Smith, there's no Warner, there's no Glenn Maxwell, there's no Matthew Wade. So it's a different look ODI team for Australia. So what are the challenges going to be presented to Pakistan with the bat and the ball in the series? Well, we'll start with the batting. I've highlighted 3 batsmen in particular who are going to be the key for Pakistan in this series, and that's Babar Azam, obviously, no surprise there. The other one is Aman al-Haq and Zaman and Mohammad Rizwan. Those batsmen are going to be very important for Pakistan because they're the most experienced players in this ODI team. Obviously, Azam has played 83 matches. Al-Haq's played 46. Zaman's played 53. And Mohammad Rizwan's got a lot of experience as well in the ODI setup for Pakistan. So those batsmen in particular are going to be very important for Pakistan in this series. If Pakistan are to set big totals or chase down runs when batting second in this series, it's very important that those batsmen have a big series and a big impact and got to stand up as the senior players, because the other batsmen they've got in the side, they're less experienced and they're only newcomers to ODI cricket, international cricket. They haven't played much, so it's very important for Azam, Al-Haq, Zaman and Rizwan, being the senior players and being the veterans in the side. It's very important that they lead from the front and make sure they get the job done with the bat in this ODI series and then in the one-off T20 international. So it's very important for them to stand up as the senior players in this series. Also for Pakistan, it's important for them to do the basics with the bat, rotate strike, build partnerships, making sure they leave the good balls, hit the bad balls, and converting the starts into big scores. And that's going to be very important for the top order in terms of Babar Azam, Al-Haq, Rizwan and Saman. It's very important for them to convert their starts into big scores and big centuries, because with the rest of this Pakistan batting lineup, you have a look at the numbers and the experience, it's very little. So it's very important for them to stand up being the experienced players in this side. Also, the other biggest challenge facing them is that some of the Australian bowlers, they wouldn't have faced them before in cricket or international cricket before. Australia have got some different bowlers. Obviously, there's no Cummins, Stark or Hazelwood, so they're going to be facing different bowlers like Abbott, Behrendorff, Ellis, Dwarshuis, who they haven't even seen before or faced in international cricket. So that will be a different challenge for the Pakistan batsmen. If they do face those bowlers in this series, it'll be very important to have their set plans to them, make sure they feel comfortable facing them, and work out what they're trying to do to get them out. So that's very important for the Pakistan batsmen to make sure that they're batting accordingly to the situation, and also finding out what the bowler's trying to do in terms of getting them out as a batsman. So definitely they're going to be a bit unsure with those bowlers like Abbott, Ellis, in particular, who they haven't faced before in international cricket. It will be very important for them to have their clear plans and methods towards them. So that's the other biggest challenge facing the Pakistan batsmen. So if the Pakistan batsmen, if those batsmen I mentioned before, Azam, Al-Haq, Rizwan and Saman, if they can stand up and score big scores in this series, and if Pakistan can do the basics with the bat, and every other batsman in the side can contribute and support Azam and in particular as the captain, and the rest of the batsmen I mentioned before, Rizwan and Al-Haq and Saman, then I think Pakistan are a good chance to set big totals in this series and chase down any total that Australia sets in this series. So if they can do that, I think they'll do pretty okay with the bat in the series. Let's talk about the bowling quickly, some of the challenges facing them. I've highlighted 3 players that are important for Pakistan with the bowling, and that's Shaheen Afridi, Hassan Ali, and Shadab Khan. Obviously, when you have a look at the bowling experience, definitely those 3 are the most experienced ODI bowlers for Pakistan in this Pakistan team. Shadab Khan's played 48 matches, he's taken 62 wickets. Afridi's played 28 matches for 87 wickets. And obviously Hassan Ali's played 57 matches and taken 89 wickets. So those 3 bowlers in particular are very important for Pakistan in this series because they are the senior players, and the rest of the bowling that they have in the side, Pakistan, is less experience. They haven't played much cricket or any cricket at all at international level. So it's very important for those bowlers in particular to stand up being the senior players and being the veterans of the side. It's very important to lead from the front and make sure they contribute and take wickets, because if those 3 fire, because they're pretty good bowlers. Shaheen Afridi's been pretty good for some time now. Shadab Khan's a very good all-rounder for Pakistan. He can bat, he can bowl. And also Hassan Ali can be very good as well. They're all good bowlers. They're all quality bowlers. If they have a big series for Pakistan, then I think Pakistan will cause some problems to the Australian batsmen, because it is a different batting lineup for Australia in this ODI series, because you haven't got Smith, you haven't got Mitchell Marsh, you haven't got Wade, Maxwell or Warner. It's a very different batting lineup for Australia. So if they can take wickets and cause problems, then I think Pakistan would do well with the ball. And if the other bowlers in the side can contribute and support them, then I think Pakistan will be able to get the job done with the ball and bowl Australia out or keep them down in terms of defending or trying to restrict them. The biggest challenge for Pakistan is that they'll be bowling to new batsmen in this Australian team. Obviously, they haven't played against some of these Australian batsmen before, like Ben McDermott, for example. They haven't really bowled to him a lot. So it's about trying to adjust their plans to batsmen that they haven't bowled to before or played against in international cricket. So that'll be the challenge for Pakistan, just like with the batting when facing the bowlers. It's the same thing with the bowlers here. It's about trying to adjust their plans to the Australian batsmen, making sure their plans are pretty clear and they know what they're doing. So if they can do that, then I think they'll have no problems at all. And the other challenge for Pakistan is to stick to the basics. It's very important to do the basics. Bowl consistent line of length, bowl to a plan. Don't bowl any extras, obviously. You don't want to bowl no balls or wides. They pretty much hurt you in ODIs and T20s. So very important to keep the extras low with the ball. Bowl dot balls and maidens to build pressure. So if Pakistan can do that, if they can do the basics with the ball, they can take wickets, and if Afridi, Shadab Khan and Hassan Ali have a big series, then I think they can cause Australia some problems in this ODI series. So those are some of the challenges that they'll face with the batting and the bowling side of things in this ODI series and the one-off T20 International. If Pakistan can get things together with the bat and the ball and execute with the bat and the ball, I think they're a good chance at home to win this ODI series and potentially the one-off T20 International against Australia. Let's have a look at Australia's ODI and T20 International squad and talk about some of the challenges facing Australia in this ODI series and one-off T20 International. Australia's squad is Finch, Abbott, Ashton Agar, Behrendorff, Carey, Dawshes, Ellis, Green, Head, Inglis, Labuschagne, Mitchell-Marsh, McDermott, Stoinis, Swepson and Zampa. That's Australia's squad for this ODI series and for the one-off T20 International against Pakistan. Obviously for Australia, this is Australia's first ODI series in Pakistan since 1998. Australia won that series 3-0, so Australia will be looking to do a bit of a repeat of the Test series performance from 1998, where they won 1-0 there, and then obviously came back 24 years later in 2022 to win the Test series 1-0 again. So hopefully for the ODI team, they can definitely repeat what they did back in 1998, where they won the series 3-0, and hopefully Australia can win the series 3-0 again in 2022. But I don't think it's going to be easier. I don't think it's going to be easy for Australia, I should say, this time around, because it's not their strongest squad on paper. It's a different squad because some of the major names from the squad are missing, and Australia have chosen some other players to experiment with and give them a go in this ODI series. Obviously, big names missing for Australia, as I said. So some of the changes they've made to the squad. There's some changes and some players who are out, obviously being rested, but also some players that have received injuries and not available for the series who were in the squad originally. So some of the changes to the squad have been, well, recently Mitchell-Marsh, he's out of the squad due to a hip flexor injury he sustained at training, and he will not take any part in the ODI series in the one-off T20 International. Also, Josh Inglis, he will miss out the ODI series, and he will be available for the one-off T20 International after testing positive, obviously, in the world that we're living in. He tested positive, and he has to spend 5 days in isolation before he can rejoin the squad. So during that period of isolation, he'll miss out the miss out the ODIs, and he'll play for Australia in the one-off T20 if available and if selected. Matt Renshaw's been called up to the squad as backup, but will be only available for the third ODI and the one-off T20 because he's got to serve a 3-day isolation period upon arrival in Pakistan, Matt Renshaw. So he's been called up as backup for Josh Inglis and be on standby. But obviously he'll miss out the first 2 games of the ODI series, and he'll be available for the last ODI and the one-off T20. So Matt Renshaw being called up. Obviously, good to see Matt get the call-up, and he's done pretty well for Queensland in one-day cricket of recent times, so good to see him get the call-up for the Australian team. Obviously, Steve Smith was in the ODI squad originally. He's now out of the squad due to an elbow injury that flared up during the Test series. Australia didn't want to risk it. Obviously, there's a lot of cricket going forward for the Australian team, obviously. So Steve Smith has been left out of the squad. Mitchell Swepson, he was a part of the Test squad for Australia in the recent Test series against Pakistan just concluded. He comes into the squad to replace him. Kane Richardson was in the squad originally, but he tweaked his hamstring before departing to Pakistan. Obviously, during Australia's training camp in Melbourne, he pulled up a bit sore with his hamstring, tweaked something there. So Australia decided not to risk him on this tour of Pakistan. Obviously, as I mentioned before, some of the main players are missing from this Australian one-day team. Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood and Warner have been rested after the Test matches against Pakistan. And that's no surprise, obviously. That's just the world that we're living in modern times in cricket, because there's a lot of cricket on and you've got to rest players and rotate players. So they've been rested after a very good Test series from all of them. Glenn Maxwell's not in the squad. Obviously, Glenn Maxwell just recently got married. So his marriage and the tour of Pakistan sort of clashed. So that's why he's not here in Pakistan, because of his getting married, of course. Matthew Wade's not in the squad. He's not in the series. He's in the IPL at the moment, playing for the Gujarat Titans, one of the new teams in the IPL. So he's not playing in the series. So there's a lot of changes to Australia's ODI squad. And as I said, a lot of the main players are not featuring. But there's some new players, and obviously some different players that have played for Australia before. It's a new look ODI team, as I said. And as I said, it's not Australia's strongest squad that they've produced. It's definitely their B or C or D team. But as I said before, it's not a bad opportunity for Australia to try different players out, because as we know, there's a 50-over World Cup soon approaching in India next year, and also the T20 World Cup later on this year in Australia. Australia want to try different players and see what they do and how do they go in different conditions and how do they gel together. And I don't think that's a bad thing for Australia to do. Obviously, you've got to find opportunities to try different players. And it's a perfect opportunity for the Australian team to do that. Obviously, it's not their most experienced team. Looking at the numbers, when you take out those players like Smith, Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood, Wade, Maxwell, Warner, Mitchell Marsh in particular, there's a lot of experience that's out of the side in terms of runs and wickets and experience and quality. When you look at the rest of the squad that they have, most of them haven't played a lot of ODI matches in their career, but it's a perfect opportunity for them to put their name up for selection and show the selectors that if you select us, we can do the job. And as I mentioned before, it's a perfect opportunity for Australia to try players, because if the main players were a part of this ODI squad, then these players who've been selected, like Sean Abbott, Behrendorff, Dorcas, Ellis, McDermott in particular, and Mitchell Swepson, they wouldn't have had an opportunity to play if the main players were playing. So it's a perfect opportunity for them. And obviously it's a perfect opportunity for Australia to see how different players will go, especially when there's a T20 World Cup later on this year, and also a 50-over World Cup next year in India. Australia got to test out the depth, and that's very important, because heading into a World Cup, a 50-over World Cup next year in India, what happens if some of the main players like Smith, Mitchell Marsh, Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood, Wade, Maxwell and Warner have an injury? You've got to test out the depth and see who's underneath them, who's coming up underneath them. So it's very important to try out different players to see how good the depth is heading into a 50-over World Cup and a T20 World Cup later on this year. So just in case something happens to the main players. So I like how Australia are experimenting, and it's a good thing to try different players, because you've got to see how different players go and what do they do and how do they respond to different situations in a match. How do they go with the bat? How do they go with the ball? So as I said before, it's not their strongest squad on paper, but it's important for Australia to try different players and see what they can do, especially for the World Cup and also T20 World Cup. So it's definitely an experimental squad. I don't think there's any big expectations on Australia to win this series. For them, it's just about trying to see what they can do with this group of players. Obviously, the Test series was the main priority for Australia, and Australia won the series 1-0. So this ODI series and T20 series, this ODI series and the one-off T20, it's just about trying different players and experimenting, heading into a World Cup, 50-over World Cup next year in India, and heading into the T20 World Cup later on this year in Australia. It's all about experimentation and that for Australia. And also it's important for Australia to win some games in this ODI series, and it's the same thing for Pakistan as well, because of the ODI ICC Cricket World Cup Super League for qualification for the 50-over World Cup next year in India in 2023. It's very important that both teams try and win some games to earn points to make sure they qualify for the World Cup next year. So that's on the forefront of Australia's mind. We've got to win some games. It's not our strongest squad, but we've got to win some games to get some points so we qualify for the World Cup next year in India. So that will be the main priority for Australia in this series. Now, what are some of the challenges facing them with the batting and the bowling side of things? I will start with the batting. In the absence of Warner, Smith, Maxwell, and Wade, and Mitchell Marsh, it's going to be a very tough thing for Australia to find runs. Now, they've got Aaron Finch, they've got Marnus Labuschagne, they've got Ben McDermott, they've got Marcus Stoinis, Travis Head, Cameron Green in the side, and Alex Carey. All of those players will have to stand up in the absence of Warner, Smith, Maxwell, and Wade. Obviously, those players score a lot of runs for Australian one-day cricket, but they're not here. So Aaron Finch has got to stand up as captain. He's out of form, as we all know. In this series, with a very inexperienced batting lineup, when you have a look at the numbers, he's the one who's played the most matches out of the batting unit, 132. Compare that to Carey, he's only played 45. Cameron Green's only played one-day international. Travis Head's played 42. Labuschagne's played 13 matches. McDermott's only played 2. Stoinis has played 45. So there is experience there with the batting lineup for Australia, but Aaron Finch is the most experienced player. So he will need to stand up for Australia with the bat in this series, and the other batsmen need to follow in his lead. The likes of Cameron Green, I'm looking forward to seeing him get an opportunity, along with Marnus Labuschagne. They'll definitely get an opportunity in this ODI series. Travis Head may get an opportunity as well. Ben McDermott may open the batting with Aaron Finch, as we saw in the T20 Internationals against Sri Lanka. And Marcus Stoinis will bat down the order and do what he does. So the batting for Australia, the challenge will be for them, how do they score the runs in the absence of Warner, Smith, Maxwell, and Wade? It's going to be a very tough challenge, but I think they're up to the challenge. And if Aaron Finch can lead from the front and the other batsmen can contribute and build partnerships and do the basics, I think Australia can set totals that will make sure they win the games and hopefully win the series. Also, another factor is the different conditions. Australia are not used to these conditions in Pakistan, vastly different to other parts of the world. So it'll be interesting to see how the batsmen adjust to the new conditions. Obviously, with Marnus Labuschagne, Cameron Green, Travis Head, and Alex Carey, they've been playing in the Test series, obviously, so they know how these pitches play. Whereas Aaron Finch and Ben McDermott and Marcus Stoinis, for example, they haven't played here in Pakistan before. So they'll be gathering information from Labuschagne, Green, and Head and Carey on how the pitches play here in Pakistan. So it'll be very interesting to see how Australia adapt to conditions. If they can adapt to the conditions and bat accordingly to the conditions, then I think they'll be okay with the bat in this series. So those are some of the challenges that Australia face with the bat in the series. Let's talk about the bowling. Obviously, no Cummins, no Stark, no Hazelwood. That's a big hole to fill. Looking at the numbers, you have a pretty much inexperienced bowling lineup. You got Sean Abbott, he's only played 2 matches. Ashton Agar's played 15. Jason Behrendorff's only played 11 matches. Nathan Ellis, he hasn't even played any one-day internationals for Australia, but he's played some T20 internationals for Australia. Obviously, we saw him in Bangladesh when he got that hat-trick. So he's got a bit of experience in the international format, but he hasn't played one-day internationals for Australia. Cameron Green, as the all-rounder, he's only played 1 match. Obviously, Marcus Stoinis has played 45 matches. He's got a bit of experience with the ball. Mitchell Swepson hasn't even debuted in ODIs yet for Australia. He's played a few T20s for Australia. And Adam Zampa's the most experienced bowler in this bowling lineup. He's played 64 matches and he's taken 97 wickets. So it'll be interesting to see how that bowling lineup clicks and takes the wickets for Australia in this series. Adam Zampa, for me, will be the important bowler in this lineup for Australia because he's the senior bowler, he's the most experienced bowler, and he's going to be the leader of this attack. In the absence of Cummins, Stark, and Hazelwood, he needs to stand up as the senior player and the senior bowler and lead this bowling attack for Australia. So the challenge for Australia is, how do they find those wickets? All those bowlers that we have in this squad, Agar, Abbott, Behrendorff, Ellis, Green, Stoinis, Swepson, and Zampa himself, all of them have had experience playing for Australia before, obviously, and they've done pretty well for their BBL teams and various franchises around the world. So they know what they're doing. So they can definitely take wickets. But it'll be very important for Adam Zampa to lead from the front as the senior bowler in the absence of Cummins, Stark and Hazelwood. Also, you've got Ben Dorshus. I forgot about him. He's in the squad. He hasn't even played for Australia yet in all formats. So he may come in and make his debut, ODI debut. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes. But it's a very inexperienced bowling lineup. The only one who's experienced is Adam Zampa, obviously. And as I said before, he's going to be the key. If he can stand up with the ball and take wickets, and then hopefully the other bowlers can contribute and take wickets, then I think Australia will be fine with the ball in this ODI series. And also for the bowlers, different conditions. Same as the batsmen, different conditions. For most of the bowlers, they haven't even played here in Pakistan. But obviously they can rely on the information that Cameron Green has got from playing in Pakistan. Obviously Cameron Green's been a part of the Australian Test squad. He's bowled a lot of overs in the Test series recently. So I think the other bowlers will feed off him and gather that information from him in terms of how do we bowl on these surfaces in Pakistan. So I think he'll be very important for that information in terms of the conditions and what you need to do and how you got to bowl on these surfaces. So if the Australian bowlers can take wickets, adapt to the conditions with the ball, and Adam Zampa stands up as the main bowler and as the senior bowler and the leader of the attack, I think Australia won't have any problems of taking, 10 wickets or bowling Pakistan out in this series. So those are some of the challenges facing Australia with the batting and the bowling in this ODI series. If they can execute with the bat and the ball, Australia, then they're a good chance to win this ODI series. But it's an inexperienced squad, but I think they can definitely do well and win a few games. The expectations are not high, but if they can get it together with the bat and the ball, I think they're a good chance of winning the series. Let's predict who's going to win this ODI series and the one-off T20 International. The leading run scorer, the leading wicket taker for the ODI series, and leading run scorer, leading wicket taker for both Pakistan and Australia in this ODI series. Let's start who will win this ODI series overall. I think with both teams picking players who are less experienced in the ODI format or international cricket, I think this series may go either way. But obviously with Australia, with less experience in their squad, Pakistan are playing at home. I think you could say that Pakistan are favourites to win because it's at home, and obviously Australia have a weak and inexperienced team. But I think the series could go either way. I don't think one team's probably going to win 3-0 or something like that. I think it's going to be 2-1 or something like that either side. Obviously Australia have got some players who can get the job done, but I think being at home, they've got the advantage of playing in these conditions. They know how to play in these conditions. And given that Australia's got an inexperienced lineup, I think Pakistan may win this ODI series, probably 2-1, maybe. Obviously, they're at home. They're obviously favourites to win. And the reason I say that is because Australia's got an inexperienced side and they haven't played in Pakistan before in one-day cricket or T20 cricket, so they don't know these conditions. So I think Pakistan at home may win the series 2-1. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But that's my prediction on the series winner for the ODI series. My prediction for the one-off T20 International, as I said, it could go either way for that as well. We know in T20 Internationals, it's always unpredictable. You never know who's going to win in T20 cricket. It's whoever executes on the day with both bat and ball will win the match. So obviously both Pakistan and Australia met in the semi-final of the T20 World Cup last year, and both teams are very good at T20 cricket, as we know, obviously, because they met in the semi-final of the T20 World Cup last year. So going into this one-off T20 International, following the ODI series, whoever can execute with both bat and ball will win the match. I think it's very hard to choose who's going to win that T20 because at the end of the day, T20 cricket's unpredictable, and whoever executes on the day with both bat and ball will win the series. Or will win the one-off T20. So that could go either way. So we'll have to wait and see when that happens. So that's my prediction for the one-off T20 International. Now, My predictions for the leading run scorer and leading wicket taker of the ODI series, I've gone with Babar Azam as the leading run scorer for the series overall, and I've gone with Shaheen Shah Afridi for the leading wicket taker in the ODI series. I think those two will probably have a big series for Pakistan and play a big part in the ODI series. My predictions for the leading run scorer for Pakistan in this ODI series, as I mentioned before, was Babar Azam. Leading wicket taker for Pakistan in this ODI series, I mentioned him before, Shaheen Shah Afridi. My prediction for the leading run scorer for Australia in this ODI series, I think Aaron Finch will be the leading run scorer in this series. Obviously, in the absence of the main batsmen, Warner, Maxwell, Wade, and Smith, he needs a big series as the captain to stand up and try and get Australia over the line. My leading wicket taker prediction for Australia in this ODI series, I've gone with Adam Zampa, obviously being the senior bowler. In the absence of Stark, Cummins and Hazelwood, he needs to be the one to stand up and have a big series for Australia. So those are my predictions for the leading run scorer and wicket taker for both Pakistan and Australia, and for the one-off T20 International and for the ODI series winner. Those are my predictions that I've given. Obviously, let's see if those predictions are right, but at the end of the day, they're predictions, and it could go either way, as we know, because cricket's unpredictable. Let's hope we have a good ODI series between Pakistan and Australia, and may the best team win. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get the latest episodes of the podcast, and like and share our Facebook page, and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Until next time, keep safe, and bye for now.